men's jersey on. It's opening. It's home opener today. We're supporting Major League Baseball.
I've got my politically incorrect shirt from the old All-Star game.
You racist jerk.
Yeah. Yeah, you're real liberal, aren't you, Krantz? Look what you're doing.
Real liberal. That's real good. That's like blackface for Indians. Good job. Oh,
no, the one from the other one, the old one, the one with the giant nose is like 10 times worse.
It's very bad, but what got me so bad is when they would make the playoffs, and they were in a few years ago, is they'd have those guys in the stands with their faces painted red. Remember, they had those at a couple times. You're like, oh, this is not. There's no way you can. I can't really.
By the way, I had the greatest timing on Saturday. We were watching the last 3 Nashvilles. So I was just kind of checking in on my phone or something with the game at night, the second game, and next thing I know, we're done with Nashville, or we're still closing in on the end of Nashville. I turn on, and it's right at the beginning of overtime.
So well, you didn't nail that one.
I saw the overtime, and I saw, you know what they're going to call that? The shot. Okay, this is like an original. They're going to call that the shot. And by the way, I shed a tear. I shed a tear for Bill Walton.
They had a good run. And it's fine.
And Kareem.
And all of the great ones. Jamal Silk Wilkes, all the great UCLA players of all time.
Yeah. All right, let's rock.
Ready.
We're there. Okay. It is the first Brad and Britt cast for this week. We're glad you are with us here live in the 1:30 or so hour Eastern time on Monday. Thank you very much. Are you up on the Greg Murphy story? Holy shit!
No, I'm not. I'm not completely up on the Greg Murphy story.
Oh, you're not up on the Greg Murphy story.
No, not so much.
While we're starting to talk about this, just type in Greg Murphy
looking right
Twitter.
Now.
Okay, yeah. Just type in Greg Murphy and Twitter, and there is an ongoing contest that never ends between all the Republicans in Congress on which one can be the biggest doofus, the biggest dick, the biggest racist at any given moment. And Greg Murphy, he's that urologist who got elected in Eastern North Carolina to Congress. So he would be one of those classic backbenchers. No one's heard of him. He never appears on TV. You just don't see him. You
couldn't pick him out of a lineup. There's no way you could ever pick him out of a lineup. Forget it.
Right. That would absolutely be the definition of that. And occasionally he mouths off. I mean, he mouthed off in January about Kamala Harris. He made some racist remark about Kamala Harris. And this time he decided to go after Representative Ilhan Omar of Minnesota, who, because we live in the South, and whenever we see her on TV, we just think that she's a terrorist because she's a Muslim.
Is that what we think?
That's what we think here in North Carolina.
And I think Greg Murphy holds that seat that Walter Jones Jr. used to hold, I believe.
Is that the seat?
I think that's the seat that he holds.
Got it. So late last week, Representative Omar of Minnesota, who clearly would have been one of the major targets on January 6th had the mob gotten further than they got, right?
Yeah.
She would be right at the top
Yeah.
of the list. And by the way, for good reason, because of course she is a Muslim terrorist masquerading as a Democratic congressperson.
And her
right?
complexion would have made her, I think, attractive as a target for those folks for some reason or other.
Right.
Something makes me think that.
Right. So she tweets out, I think this was on Friday, heartbroken to learn another Capitol police officer was killed while protecting the Capitol. My thoughts and prayers go out to the officer's family, the entire Capitol police force. The death toll would have been worse if the assailant had an AR-15 instead of a knife. Now,
how dare she?
Hang on. So in right-wing Fox world, asshole Republican world, that was going over the line.
That's
that
so
was
inappropriate.
that was insulting a gun, right?
This is what they get pissed off about.
Right. So
they have to come to the defense of the gun. That's what they have to.
They're coming to the defense of the gun, and of course the inappropriateness and the opportunity that opportunist congresswoman from Minnesota used to insult good Americans, most of whom are never going to use their guns for a mash. So how dare she do that, right? So his response is, would have been worse if they'd been flying planes into the buildings also. Ooh, way to go. Zing, got her. And as a proud, I think that he speaks on behalf of all of us because we know you cannot let an obnoxious tweet like that from her go unanswered. Don't you think? That was so out of line.
But unfortunately, he felt the need to delete the tweet. That's the problem right there, is he wouldn't stand behind it, right?
But Britt, if he deletes it, that means he never said it. And you have no right, and no one has.
And again, this goes back to your classic marriage analogy. If I call my wife a fat C word, but then I say, no, I take it back, then you never said it. It's no problem in the marriage, and she can't get mad at you, and she can't leave you. That's how that works, isn't it?
Right. So, Greg Murphy, on the long list of stupid things that Republican members, it's in there, but he's a nobody, and this isn't going to register very much across the country. I don't think it might get a mention here or there, but because he's sort of a nobody, we're not going to hear probably much more about it. Now, wait a minute. We have a comment from someone who's a little bit more well known than Elon, Omar, and in particular Greg Murphy, and that would be Mike Huckabee. Have you seen the Mike Huckabee tweet?
I did see the Mike Huckabee story. I did see that. I think they highlighted that on like Mediaite or something.
Okay, so he has to weigh in. He has to weigh in on Major League Baseball and the Georgia voting law and that whole thing. And here's his tweet. This was Saturday. I've decided to identify as Chinese. Coke will like me. Delta will agree with my values, in air quotes, and I'll probably get shoes from Nike and tickets to all Major League Baseball games that I want. Ain't America great? Now, it needs a slight bit of explanation here. Of course, we know about Coke and Delta. They're involved with Major League Baseball right now. But as far as Nike, this looks like a call out by Mike Huckabee. And again, if you have to explain it, it sucks, right?
Yeah, you're losing, right?
You're losing. But this appears to be tied to the backlash against Nike over the ad that they ran, 3 years ago that featured Colin Kaepernick, which, by the way, was an award-winning, wonderful. It was like a 3-minute commercial. Remember that long piece that they ran?
Yeah.
Right. As well as they pulled off a Betsy Ross sneaker because Colin Kaepernick, a spokesman for Nike, said that's bullshit because, as you know, the Betsy Ross, the 13-star flag has been used by some white supremacist movement. So there's Mike Huckabee making 6 degrees of separation come closer to him in being a prick, okay, which he is. So those are your 2 best tweets of the last few days, as far as I'm concerned.
Now, the update on the Major League Baseball story is that Gregory Shake You Down Abbott, the governor of the great state of Texas, has declined throwing out the first pitch at the Rangers home opener over Major League Baseball.
That'll hurt. That's got to hurt. Really?
That's over painful. Over Major League Baseball taking the All-Star game out of Atlanta because of voter suppression laws that were passed in Georgia. Of course, the Atlanta Braves immediately after Major League Baseball made that decision said they were deeply disappointed with Major League Baseball for not letting their fans see baseball's greatest stars in Cobb County. So, what do you think about that?
Well, let's just pick up where we are right now with what has been over the weekend, some fact checking and some deeper dives into the details of the legislation, which is 100 pages long, which has a lot of different aspects to it, and the overarching whataboutism that essentially revolves around this. Georgia had and still has and has improved on the number of early voting days compared to a state like New York, which, by the way, no one is defending New York. New York has been a fucked up state on voting forever. Everybody went to early voting,
right?
And New York didn't.
Run by Democrats.
Forever.
It should be noted. New York basically run by Democrats. Right.
Now, okay. So what they've done is they've picked out aspects of what just happened in Georgia, and they said, well, what about this state doing this? And what about that state doing that? We're not only not worse than them, we're actually better than them. And so shut the hell up. And Georgia is great. And that's not a defense, because what it does is it deflects. It deflects from the fact that the Republican Secretary of State, the Republican in charge of elections, that Gabriel Sherman guy, for the last 3-4 months since the election have said over and over again, fouling off bullshit from Donald Trump, that the election was on the level, no fraud, no discernible fraud, no number of votes could have, would have, or should have been changed. And the election ran very, very smoothly, as it did across the country, which, after what happened in 2016 with the Russian influence in our election, it looks like everybody did their job really, really well. So the big question isn't if you tweak the number of days here or there on early voting, but they put little cherry bombs in those kinds of rules. But counties can decide this or that. It's bullshit, okay?
Yeah.
For 1 second, do not think for 1 second that whatever was done is about voter integrity. It just isn't. That's horse shit, and we know it. And I'm not going to repeat what everyone knows, that's just a lie. It's not about voter integrity.
I know you smacked me down on this, but I would like to know the number of elections that have been decided by a piece of pizza being handed to someone in a line to vote. I just like, in broad numbers, how much voter fraud has gone on based on food or water being handed to somebody in a line. If they could just give me a round number on that.
But see, now their explanation on that. And what they're saying is that all of us, including Major League Baseball, including everybody, every liberal, every Democrat, everyone who said, what the fuck are they doing? This is Jim Crow. It's not Jim Crow 2. There's no literacy test. There's no count the beans in the jar. That's not what we're doing here. I mean, look at what we've done. We've actually made things better on the margins, not worse. And of course, that's not true. Because if the election was so well done in 2020, it was because everybody tried harder, changes were made, lots of drop boxes all over the place, And one of the provisions of this law is we're going to yank back all the drop boxes, the new ones. And the excuse is because the drop boxes only existed in 2020 because of the pandemic. Well, you know what? That actually might turn out to have been, it should have turned out to have been one of the byproducts of the pandemic that ended up being a good thing for people, more places to drop off their ballots. And there is one thing that they're doing that you have to ask the overarching question. Why now? Why did the rules have to be changed right now? And it's only because Donald Trump bitched that the election was stolen from him and quote unquote, people feel that he actually won. So therefore, we're going to make some changes that cosmetically may look like we're making things better, but the big one, the mother of all changes that was made was the one that allows the state of Georgia, the government of the state of Georgia to tell some county, you ain't doing it right. We're going to come in there and we're going to fix that. That's what Donald Trump did when he made those phone calls that were recorded where he said, find me 11,000 votes. If the rules that have now been changed in Georgia were in effect 5 months ago, it's very possible that they would have found a way to go in to some of those counties, Fulton County in particular, the ones right around Atlanta in particular, and changed some votes, made some rule changes, done something, but they weren't allowed to do it because of what had been in place in Georgia. So the changes have been made, and under the guise of we can't allow this to ever happen again, that doesn't mean that we should change rules so that what happened to Donald Trump, which is that he lost a free and fair election, can never happen again. That can never be allowed to happen again. No, that's not what can never happen again is supposed to mean. Okay, so
what a piece of garbage Raffensperger is, though. Like, he sets himself up as some sort of hero, right, to save democracy a couple of months ago. And it turns out all he wanted to do was to jack all this stuff up for the future and deny certain people who happen to have darker skin than him the right to vote. That's basically what's happening here. What a worm this guy turned out to be.
Well, I don't think he's the real bad guy here, because
he's one of them. He's in the cast.
But a lot of his authority has basically been yanked away. He's being punished, Britt. He didn't come up with this shit. It's that governor.
He's endorsed this. He's been a part of this. But I mean, I know it's not been like his idea. But yeah.
But it's that Governor Kemp who, if you go back and you look at what George Wallace said when he stood in front of the schoolhouse door, or if you look at what he said during his inauguration in 1963, that was the famous segregation today, segregation tomorrow, segregation forever speech. That was at an inauguration. That wasn't standing in front of the schoolhouse door or anything. That is very close to what Brian Kemp was saying over the weekend in striking back at everyone trying to defend the great honor of Georgia over Major League Baseball coming in and raping it by yanking the All-Star game away. And by the way, have you seen the Marco Rubio response?
Yeah, I did.
Oh my God! Oh, he wants you to know. He wants you to know that Rob Manfred, the Major League Baseball commissioner, is also a member of Augusta National Golf Course. Is he going to turn in his membership, rip up the card, and say, I don't want to be a part of that? Not in that.
Maybe he will.
Come on, you big hypocrite. Yeah.
Is that going to be enough if he does? I do love the number of conservatives who are now telling you that you need to boycott Major League Baseball and all this other stuff. I really enjoy that. That's kind of fun.
Well, first of all, old white guys are never going to give up baseball. Don't worry. They ain't going to give it up. What are they going to give it up for? Is suddenly Major League Soccer going to become the preferred sport of the largely older, whiter fan base of baseball.
Well, there's been a fair amount of racism.
No.
If they just knew the amount of bigotry and racism that's been associated with the game of soccer, I don't think necessarily here in the United States, but around the world. You've heard those stories about in Europe where some of the African players, they would throw bananas at them.
Yeah, it's not a comparison game. It's not a comparison game at all.
But I'm just saying, for the people that really, for the really bigoted guys who are really into racism and stuff, if they could just find out how nasty and awful the game of soccer has been around the world, they might subscribe to it. They might go ahead and start putting on their Seattle Sounders jerseys and shit like that. You have no idea. They might be Portland Timbers fans. You have no idea.
Well, see, this is the stupidity, I think, of Marco Rubio, who, man, every few months he really comes out with some whoppers, doesn't he? He thinks he's the cleverest guy in the room, and it never seems to work out that way. But in this case, Rob Manfred, he's the Major League Baseball commissioner. I can assure you, I guarantee you that the move to not play the All-Star game in Atlanta was not his sole decision. Those were the players. Those are the players who were saying to him, we don't want to play the game in Atlanta. We don't want to be a part of that, and we want.
We won't show up for it. And they've got leverage. If they don't want to show up for the damn game, they're not going to have a damn game. And it's not, again, the All-Star game is not what it used to be, but they still generate millions of dollars in revenue. They sell a lot of tickets for it, and it is network programming. So if they don't show up for the game, it's kind of a problem, and it makes a story. So
and so. But Manfred is the most visible target, even though he's another guy who nobody could identify if he walked down the street, because he's fairly, as far as professional sports commissioners, he's fairly anonymous.
He's a suburban white guy. He's basic anonymous suburban white guy. He's a guy you would see out mowing the grass on the weekend wearing Skechers. That's Rob Manfred. That's what you would notice when you saw him on the street. And perhaps he's trying to find out what the young people are into as far as this Avengers movie goes. That's Rob Manfred, and that's fine. And that's who he is. But he's not.
I just think when you pull back, and look at what this moment is going to appear as in history, I think it will go perfectly in line with the NFL yanking the Super Bowl from Arizona.
Yeah.
Was that 20 years ago? Was it 20 or 30 years ago? Whatever it was.
30. It's like 30 years ago.
Yeah. A long time ago. And you just do these things. This is how you make a statement.
It's not that hard to call. Honestly, there's hard calls in life, and there's not, and it's really not. And it's sad that some of these corporations had to be shamed into it. They eventually made the right decision when everything else was kind of at the last moment they were able to kind of make the right decision, which is fine.
But you see what's going to happen now because of what we were talking about 10 minutes ago. No matter where they put the game, no matter where it goes, if you put it at Yankee Stadium, why are you playing it in New York? They don't have as many early voting days as we do in. You can see the setup there. What about California? Well, in California, they've been under a democratic control like the old Soviet Union now for decades. There aren't free and fair elections in California. They're going to come up with some shit
every time
that is not going to make sense, but it's going to feel and it's going to sound good to people who want to go down that road with them. And we'll see. But I think it's a smart move. It's a wise move. How about this? Let's see. WWH. What would Hank Aaron do?
He'd be behind it. He would have supported this 100%. I mean, even
of course,
with his association with the Atlanta Braves, and he would have been
right.
And I'll tell you another thing: if Hank Aaron was alive, I don't think the Atlanta Braves organization has the balls to put that statement out saying how disappointed they are with Major League Baseball. I think they probably hold their tongue and they don't put that out. They immediately had to appeal to their redneck base who were driving up from Aiken, South Carolina to go to the games on some weekends or some shit like that. So they have to put out that stadium talking about how disappointed they are, disappointed with Major League Baseball they are for yanking the All-Star game out of Atlanta. Psh, screw you guys. Go pound salt. Is there a level? I just want to ask the question. Is there a level at which we overdose on Schadenfreude with Matt Gaetz? I mean, I'm fine with it. I'm okay with it. I'm a Schadenfreude addict, as you know. And I love the story. I mean, I'm not sure about the women who may have been victimized by this, and sex trafficking is not a funny thing, but the ineptitude and the just frat house behavior of this asshole and watching him go down in flames, I'll be honest, it's fairly satisfying. And the fact that he paid for this stuff with Cash App and Apple Pay so that it's easily trackable makes it, to me, even that much more hilarious. So I love watching this asshole twist in the wind and blame it on everybody but Mother Goose, the cancel culture, AOC. It's everybody's fault but his own, right? It can't be his own piggish behavior. It's got to be everybody else's fault. But is there a level at which we overdose on the Schadenfreude with Matt Gaetz?
No, because
Good.
the subtext underneath it all is the complete radio silence by the Republicans on this. Because except I think Jim Jordan has
and by the way, that is the guy who should be speaking up on
it's
this.
A character witness.
Yeah, absolutely the guy.
So Gaetz turns to the Washington Examiner and writes on Monday that they're just repeating false allegations about a congressman, me. He just puts about a congressman. He's talking third person now.
It's a random congressman.
Who loathes the swamp and fights both sides of it on a daily basis.
Right. Yeah, right.
Let me remind everyone that I am a representative in Congress, not a monk, and certainly not a criminal. So, again, Dick Nixon gets topped by the modern world. I mean, Nixon is now, 50 years in the past, almost 40, and Trump, of course, I think now goes down in history as the worst, most corrupt, lying president ever. And that was quite a mountain to climb, but he's there.
He did it.
But now Matt Gaetz knocks out I am not a crook, and I am not a monk. Now it's I am not a monk. It has moved right alongside, at least, Nixon there. So I never paid for sex. I haven't slept with a 17-year-old. All right, so he denies it. But here's the fun part, and what we enjoy around here is knocking back the fake arguments or the false equivalencies that are brought up to defend him. And apparently one of them that's floating out there, and I don't know if a politician has used this, but the charge is, and listen to this, this is 5 degrees of nothingness.
Please.
That Pete, what's Pete Davidson? Not Pete David. What's his name on Saturday Night Live?
That's him.
Pete Davidson, right? So he does the imitation of Matt Gaetz on the show.
It was the cold open. I think it was the cold open on Saturday, wasn't it?
Right. He's Matt, and of course you knew it was going to be perfect because you could just grease his hair up. It's perfect. He's good.
It's great.
And the outrage is, how dare Pete Davidson make fun of Matt Gaetz? Do you know that he dated an 18-year-old? That would be Cindy Crawford's daughter. What's her name? Gerber. Right.
Yeah.
But first of all, and I'm not a lawyer, but number one, there's a big difference legally between 17 and 18.
Huge difference. Big difference.
Huge difference. And
First of
number
all,
two,
and Republicans should know this: 18-year-olds can vote. I mean, that's one of the big differences between 17 and 18.
Right. And they can sign contracts. They can do all kinds of things.
All kinds of things.
Right. 17, 18, it's different. But number two, Pete Davidson is, how should we say it, a lot closer in age to someone 18 than Matt Gaetz is.
Yeah.
Okay. Oh. And by the way, I shouldn't even bother to answer the charge.
So stupid. Yeah.
Okay. Because it's so stupid.
I always expect, I expect, more than hypocritical behavior from my comedians on Saturday Night Live. What is that about? How do they even try to throw? That's the funniest thing I ever heard. That somehow Matt Gaetz but you can tell as what a massive asshole this guy is. We've just talked about 2 people in Congress who rank just behind Ted Cruz in terms of assholeness. Like Marco Rubio's really glad, and he's very lucky that Ted Cruz is serving at the same time he is. That means he's not the biggest asshole in the United States Senate, right? If Ted Cruz wasn't there, you'd be talking about Marco Rubio right there with Ron Johnson as the biggest asshole in the United States Senate.
Well, but see, the problem is, it's whatever at any given moment elevates you above the other players in the game. For instance, you really can't say any of these people are worse than Mitch McConnell.
Yeah, that's tough.
Mitch McConnell never weighs in on culture issues. He doesn't play that game. He's not on Twitter. He does, but that doesn't matter in terms of the influence on people's lives.
Right. He's
way more important and way shittier than any of these other morons. So, we again, I don't want to downplay the horribleness of Marco Rubio or Ron Johnson or Ted Cruz or Matt Gaetz or Greg Murphy.
Historically, how does Ted Cruz rank against historical assholes in the United States Senate like Jesse Helms or Strom Thurman or McCarthy? Is he up there in that echelon of assholeness?
No, because I'll tell you why. I mean, he's of this moment for us,
right?
But he's had no legislative influence,
right?
He hasn't led a movement. For instance, Jesse Helms,
right?
As horrible as he was, and he was horrible.
He was horrible.
He does leave a mark because of what followed him, what he was responsible for,
right,
and what the disciples of him are still doing today,
right.
And I would venture to say that if Jesse Helms, my God, were in the Senate right now, just imagine where he would be. Just imagine what kind of Donald Trumper he would have been.
Well, he would have even in his wheelchair. He would have tried to open some of the doors on January the 6th and let some of those guys in and show them where to go shoot people. Over there. Nancy Pelosi's down here. He's over here. Pence is up here. Go get him and hang. I mean, Jesse Helms would have been that guy for sure. No question about it. Yeah, Jesse Helms is almost. It's hard to think of a bigger asshole. McCarthy, in his own way, but McCarthy's reign was so limited, right? It was just a few years, and then he did fall from grace and fell into disgrace. Jesse Helms had 30 years.
I know, but there's no such thing as Helmsism. When you have an entire genre of disgust and hate and vileness, right. So
as a brand. As a brand, McCarthy wins on that one. But Strom Thurman, again, for longevity, has to be considered right up there. I mean, in terms of race and civil rights and stuff, he's way worse, almost, I think, than anybody who's in the Senate right now. You can't even come close to that, I don't think.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I mean, look up. If anybody wants to look up the history of the filibuster, they want to look up the longest filibuster in history, you're welcome to do that. I believe it was 1957. And I believe it was Strom Thurman right on the floor of the Senate as they were trying to pass a Voting Rights Act or a Civil Rights Act in 57. And he stands up there for a day and reads the phone book, right?
Right. And as you know, he was the forerunner of Amazon.com because apparently he peed in a bottle 16 times during his 24 hours.
But now they're denying that. They're saying that it's not true at the factory, but some of the drivers
they're not denying it. They're not denying it. They've admitted it.
Some of them have to pee in a bottle.
They've admitted it because you know it's true. They've already apologized.
Look,
Friday night.
I work at a job where I'm chained to a desk and it's difficult, but I've never had to pee in a bottle. We don't have those sorts of conditions. August 28th, 1957, Strom Thurman began a filibuster of an extended speech, and it was the Civil Rights Act of 1957, and it does hold the record 24 hours and 18 minutes. 24 hours and 18 minutes because
but here's the point. The point is that was an era, not the modern era. That was the era when you did a filibuster, you did have to stand there and talk and hold the floor.
Correct.
And no one can do it forever. And then the legislation passes. It didn't stop the Civil Rights Act of 1957, which was not remembered quite as much as 1964. But it was a big deal. It was a big deal.
But now, you can see what they're doing now. And this is what the Republicans are trying to do now by blocking this H.R. 1 with this Voting Rights Act. it's the grandfather or the great grandson of what he was trying to do back then. It's not acceptable to go on the floor of the United States Senate and talk about segregation. That's not acceptable to do publicly. This is. You can do this, and it's very thinly veiled racism. You're able to do this, and that's what's extraordinary about what's going on now. Again, history does not repeat itself, but it does rhyme. So
Well,
yeah,
they've refined their public approach to these kinds of things. It's not quite as blatant now. You're right. You're right here.
So if you look at it, when they talk about the filibuster and talk about it being a part of Jim Crow America in the early part of the 20th century, especially, and now even into 1957 with the longest filibuster ever, because those darn black people wanted their civil rights and they wanted to be equal to white people and stuff like that. You can see now that is the history of the filibuster, and that's what they're talking about is 100% accurate. When you say that it's been a vestige and a tool of those who would try to keep us separated and to try to perpetuate things like segregation, and yeah, I mean that's the history of the filibuster for sure. That's right. What it's been for all these years.
I got a poll here. This one's very disturbing. Very disturbing. 1,000 adults surveyed March 30th and 31st. That is last Tuesday and Wednesday. You know how I know that? Because I didn't flip the page on my calendar.
Oh, you're still in March. You
I'm still in March,
you bastard.
So I know what it was. So here we go. 1,000 adults. And about half of the Republicans surveyed believe that January 6th was mostly nonviolent or caused by activist factions on the left, quote, trying to make Trump look bad. Now, that's bad enough. But then we get a little further in and go, 80% of Democrats and 60% of independents don't think the attack was mostly peaceful. So that leaves 20% of Democrats who apparently agree with Republicans that January 6th was mostly nonviolent or caused by activist factions. To me, that's 1 in 5 Democrats who don't think that what happened. To me, that's pretty fucked up.
That's
just fucked up. I mean, I don't expect Republicans to have any better sense. They've been lied to and they believe it, and they think that they have to go along with it. But 1/5 of Democrats, 60% of Republicans believe that the election was stolen from Trump. They believe what Trump says. And the same number of Republicans, 60%, hope he'll try it again in 2024.
Do you
60%? Yeah.
What are your chances right now if you had to handicap it? If this was 2023, 2024, do you think he would be the front runner right now for the Republican nomination?
He might be the front runner because of name recognition.
Yeah,
it's 100%.
Which is a lot of it.
Right. There's some value to that, but I don't think. I mean, you can't predict the future. Nobody can predict the future, but
he could win again. You could see a scenario, and I think I could see a scenario where he
if he was the nominee, could he win? Well, of course, you can always win. It's only 2 candidates, so yeah, he can win. But
and I don't know who can knock him out.
I'm not sure what's happening right now is going to start to turn people away from voting Democratic who voted Democratic here. But they're just going to play right now, apparently, say no to everything that Democrats are proposing, try to make Joe Biden into a liar because he said he would unify the country and he keeps passing shit with just Democrats. Of course, the fact that we will never vote ever for anything that Democrats propose or that Biden would sign, that has nothing to do with it. It's just that Joe Biden is a liar. So it's going to be all messaging. It's going to be who can portray what is happening as the truth and portray the other side correctly as the other side lying about the reality. And, Trump could not lie his way back into a second term. It did not work. And
I gotta say these statements over the weekend about him. I don't know. Is it just me, because you and I have a different perspective on this than maybe some people, but I think it has to be permutating to a lot of folks who are kind of in the middle that this guy is just a bitching, whining fool. That's all he does is stay down there, bitch about how he lost the election and cry about it. And then other than that happy Easter thing, which was just a litany, a list of grievances.
Well, as time goes on, and they're not going to admit it to you. Members of your family, they're not going to admit it to you because they can't admit that you're right and they were wrong, right? That's just,
right.
You can't do that. But in their heart, they know he sucks.
Right.
In their heart, they know that when they see, if they were exposed to it at all, of Donald Trump over the weekend crashing a wedding at his place down there and standing there in front of the group saying, "Miss me yet? Didn't everybody wish I would still, just think about that. Somebody who is delivering a toast or something at your wedding, and they just make it all about themselves. I mean, there is no level beneath which he'll go. And by the way, that story that ran Saturday and carries into today, because it really hasn't been answered yet correctly, about the fact that in the last few months of the campaign, when you and I and everybody were getting zillions of solicitation emails to donate to candidates here and there, or text messages even, lots of them, the ones that were going to the Trump people, when they would click on it. And
that was a great story.
Yeah. They contained the most pernicious, disgusting, lying, basically illegal thing that you can do in fundraising and in commerce in general, and in e-commerce in particular, which is in fine print at the bottom, put the negative option in there, which says, if you donate to me $20 this week, the Trump campaign can dock your credit card for another $20 charge tomorrow and the next day and the next day, or once a week, in perpetuity until you tell us to stop. The negative option, which, if I recall the old days, the good old earlier days of cable TV, they used to do that with HBO. All right. You'd get cable TV and you automatically started to get HBO, and you had to find the box to check off to get rid of HBO. Right. It's called the negative option. You're not supposed to do that.
Right. You got to opt out.
I don't know whether it's technically illegal to do that, but the ethics of it are just, they're Trumpian. I hate to say, they are Trumpian. That's exactly what he does.
And they're like these old ladies. These old ladies were like giving up $3,000 when they only meant to give like $20 or something like that.
They weren't old ladies, Britt. That's the point. They're not old ladies. They're not old ladies.
But
these are all kinds of. It's 150. It's 150 million people. 150 million dollars or so that was refunded. So their excuses. We've cheerfully refunded everybody. We didn't mean to do that, but
after we got caught, yeah.
Right. What percentage of people never followed up? What percentage of people say, "Oh, all right, whatever"? And that's the Donald Trump technique to a fine-tuned moment. Right.
Everybody
there.
gets
because I think that was coincident with the few months before the election, where we were all noting, and it was public knowledge, that the Biden campaign was just raking it in from small donors.
That's right.
He had raised more money for more people, which was scaring the shit out of the Trump folks. Of course, their quick answer was, well, Hillary outraised him too, and she had more commercials than he did, but he killed her because first of all, he didn't kill her. He didn't get as many votes as she did.
No, he didn't.
And I'm getting a little bit sick of that. And I'm really pissed off about the stories that over the last few days that, well, the Biden honeymoon is over and people are realizing just how close the election was and what little mandate Biden has for these large spending. Oh, really? It was a little mandate. It was a really close election. Was it? He fucking won by 7 million votes, way more than Hillary won. Yeah. And the Electoral College, as you know, was completely flipped. And no, it was not a blowout in the Electoral College because the Electoral College is fucked up. Okay?
That's right.
But in turn, and I think this is the big fight. This is the big war of ideas, or an idea that the Democrats have decided to go with, that the Republicans are trying to reject wholesale, which is, doesn't matter what kind of issue you're talking about, whether it's universal background checks for guns, or the rescue law that was passed a few weeks ago, $1,400 for everybody, and $2 trillion in aid for the economy, and COVID relief, and now the infrastructure bill, which has all kinds of other things associated with it, many of which really are infrastructure, unless suddenly, and by the way, I'll sidetrack myself, I'll get back to the point in just a moment. Infrastructure in 2021 is not what infrastructure was in 1912. It
Really?
isn't only roads, bridges, and wiring for electricity.
And that's it. Anything outside of that is not infrastructure.
Broadband is infrastructure.
It's a big part of our economy, as it turns out.
Getting the country to start to convert to electricity to power cars and setting up the equivalent of gas stations that are electrical is infrastructure. But okay, we'll get back to the broad point here.
Passage of those large bills.
Right. The Democrats' argument is that they do have majority support, heavy majority support for a lot of this legislation,
and they do,
for a lot of what they're doing. And just because the U.S. Senate, which is this relic, this gerrymandered, fucked up relic of the past that allows North Dakota to have as many senators as California does, with 1/30 of the population, that is not the deciding factor. And if Republicans want to go against the majority rule of the country on every issue, point by point by point, you know where they're going to end up? They're going to end up in the same place they ended up with after Obamacare passed, which day after day, week after week, year after year, Obamacare got more popular. It became more ingrained, and it was passed, of course, with only Democratic support. Back then, they didn't have to do reconciliation because, they had the 60 votes then. It was hard. They had to fight like hell to get all 60 Democrats to vote for, but they did. But the argument that Joe Biden and Democrats are making is, we have broad support for what we are doing.
And they do. I mean,
we may not have it in the U.S. Senate.
No, but poll after poll shows among the American people, they've got it. And I think that's one of the cogent points is I think there were a lot of people who were kind of maybe even expecting when they voted for Joe Biden, he would just be a guy that would show up for work and not be Donald Trump, which, by the way, would have been okay. But he's decided to take some pretty big swings. He's decided, I got the job. Let's do some shit. And he's taken some pretty big swings. They had a great story in the Washington Post over the weekend about how the U.S. economy now is looking like it's going to be the leader in pulling the world out of this COVID decline, this economic decline. And a big part of it is the stimulus money that's going to be helping to create jobs and get these manufacturers going and stuff like that. So this guy is not just showing up for work, diddling his thumbs and watching Fox News on the TiVo like the previous guy did. He's actually getting some shit done, and he knows how to get shit done because he's been in the Senate and he knows how to meander through that system.
Well, it may not matter how much experience he has if they all band together and say, bite me on everything. Right. I mean, but considering Biden's skills and the ability to pick up the phone and really talk to any of them, including the aforementioned Mitch McConnell, who I believe 3 days ago went out of his way to personally compliment Joe Biden. He just did. Now, does that mean anything at all?
No.
Ever? Right?
No.
But you know what? I don't recall ever a Democratic member of Congress or Senate. You know that Donald Trump, he's really a good fellow.
How easy is that guy to work with, huh? How we can get stuff done easily with that guy. It's just a snap. It's no problem at all.
Right. Right. So, these are interesting times. This is really, really interesting legislation that is moving right now through the big $2 trillion. And, some of the far lefty Democrats, they're saying, well, first of all, 2 trillion, that is tiny. That's not enough. It should be 10 trillion. And you can expect that. The Democratic Party is a wide swath of people that runs, from the far left over to more conservative Democrats, like the guy in Pennsylvania, Connor Lamb, represents that district right around Pittsburgh, which
Right.
They are there, and I don't know. It's hard to know. I mean, the financial markets are giving a full thumbs up to a lot of this right now. They believe if the market saying the financial markets believe
It's
is
like
saying Twitter said. It's
Yeah,
like Twitter
exactly.
said.
Yeah.
Okay, that there isn't one, but the consensus right now is, and by the way, it should be noted, and I went back and looked. It was in early 2020, maybe even late 19, but early 2020, and certainly by the time Biden became the nominee, that one of Trump's big lines over and over again was, if Joe Biden gets elected, the stock market's going to crash. You're going to lose your 401k.
That's right.
You're not. It's going to zero. It's going to zero. And of course, as we speak, all this stuff is at an all-time high. Which the early referendum by financial markets is that the needle is being threaded. Goldilocks is attending here. Not too hot, not too cold. Not a lot of inflation yet. And growth is there, and so I'm sure Trump is hoping that there'll be a big crash, and then he can say, "I told you so."
There you go.
That doesn't appear to be in the offing right now. So he's just flat out dead wrong, just dead wrong. What else you got? Anything else?
Well, it's just a massive coincidence that every time a Democrat is in office, the stock market does better than when Republicans are in office. And it just happens to be that that's been the way it is for, 80 years now, really. It's just a thing.
Right. Well, they've already calculated like the first 50 days of Biden versus the first 50 days of Trump, and the Biden performance is like a couple tenths of a percent higher, like 8.3, 8.5, statistically kind of irrelevant, but actually a big deal because it was supposed to go to zero in about
exactly
3 weeks, right? So it forgot to go to zero.
It'll remember.
Yeah, it'll remember. All right. Anything else of no? Yeah, I guess we have to have our big prediction for the NCAA finals.
Well, I think Gonzaga is going to do it. I think they're going to run the table. They're going to become the first time since 1976 in Bobby Knight's Hoosiers to go undefeated through an entire season. Look for Gonzaga to be your big winner tonight in the national championship game.
Yeah, well, I have a prediction. Ready? Headline: lowest rated NCAA finals ever.
Maybe.
Because, those of us here on the East Coast, we don't know where Gonzaga is. We just don't know.
We just don't know. If there's a school west of the Mississippi, we don't give a shit.
We don't care. Well, we know where UCLA is.
Yeah, it's in the title. It's in the name of the school.
We know where UCLA is.
It's right there in the name of the school, you bastards.
Right, Gonzaga. I thought that was that movie that opened this weekend with King Kong and Gonzaga. Right?
They were against each other.
Right.
See you tomorrow.
All right.